Storytelling has been a part of society since the dawn of time. Men and women waving tales of fairies, knights boasting about slaying dragons, mythological gods having their stories of triumph and tragedy shown in primitive theatres. The art of crafting stories has since evolved to allow people to experience stories wherever they are in the world. It's a tough market to get into these days, Hal. But don't worry, why don't we sharpen our mind by focusing on one of the fundamentals of storytelling. Today we're going to focus on talking about perspective. What is perspective? It's simply a point of view for an observer, and when curved in stories, it's always important to place the point of view in a spot where the viewer can be absorbed into it. There are three common forms of perspective a storyteller can use. First, the third person, having the narrator describe the journey from a bird's eye view, showing the external details of characters and settings, but not the internal affairs of the story. Next, second person. This is the one where the narrator involves the reader or watcher by addressing them as if they were part of the story. Similar to how I'm treating you, the audience, in this video. Finally, there's the one we'll be discussing today. The first person perspective. Casting the narrator as the main protagonist, or sometimes multiple protagonists, to reveal the inner workings of that character's mind. This perspective has always been a popular one for writers to show the nitty-gritty of how these experiences impact the narrator, allowing the viewer to relate to them. First person has also been a sensation with these newfangled video games I've heard about. Let's say here, they are referred to as FPS, or first person shooter, and they're started with classics like Doom, Wolfenstein, and System Shock. Jesus, look at this list.
These classics paved the way for such legends as Team Fortress 2, Overwatch, Call of Duty, Bioshock,
You get the idea. Oh look here, I haven't even covered first person games that aren't shooters like Amnesia, Firewatch. This bit is getting old. Moving on. Now we've covered a bit of history, it's time to talk about why you're watching this video. I know the first person view can sound like a tempting option, as it's just simply telling the story as if you were the character you created. Now hold your horses there, lad. I'm going to show you some pros and cons of the first person perspective. The way it's both a smart but lacking way of telling a story. Pro 1. Allows the viewer to have an experience they normally wouldn't have. Now this could be taken literally, as in transporting the viewer to a fantastical world like Skyrim, or on a distant planet in Borderlands. Still, it also means getting to follow the grounding experience of an army soldier, or a world where zombies have taken over most of it.
The ability to escape one's reality and insert yourself into another gives lasting personal memories for the viewer, even more satisfied customers and free referrals.
As an example of this, you ever wonder what it's like to live as a cat? Well, through the power of a small camera and a very brave volunteer, we now know what it's like to be a cat in a garage. Let's watch now and see what she does. Fascinating. Pro 2. First person allows the viewer to absorb what that character actually is. Whether it's on paper or through a screen, characters can display thoughts and genuine emotions that allow us to truly understand how their experiences impact them. These can also be simple actions like describing a wound and the pain on paper, or showing accurate sensory info like sights and sound during a moment of crisis. Whatever the case, viewing an event from one character's perspective over the others could make a drastic difference in the story. Now that we've seen some positives, let's look at some negatives. Con 1. Limiting yourself to one character does limit how a person can tell a story. First person means that you are in one character's head and only their head. Rarely does it have a moment when we pop out of there to get a larger view of the world. The narrator could also be seen as unreliable, since the story is told through a first-hand recount, and these thoughts and emotions can be biased or even manipulated in certain ways.
Con 2. The first person perspective could potentially be disorienting to those not familiar with the experience. These could be moments where the viewer has little understanding of what's going on due to the singular view, or it could cause motion sickness to those watching. This mainly focuses on virtual reality games, but could also be talking about visually heavy games or even a poorly written story. Sometimes storytellers use this to their advantage, to knock the viewers off balance for a bit before regaining footing. However, this effect is often unintentional and stems from a viewer being bombarded with several different sensory inputs at the same time, making the viewer feel very uncomfortable or dazed by the encounter. The last thing a storyteller should do is make their audience uncomfortable, as they will not be interested to see the end of the story. The only times when an audience should be uncomfortable is to enhance a scary moment or to catch them off guard, and even then, the viewer should be given a rest period after, a moment in the story to recover. Now you see, the first person view does offer a substantial amount of benefits, however, there are just as many disadvantages to go with it. Storytelling is a careful area of gaining an audience's interest, sucking them into wild tales of the past, or inventing new characters for the viewers to project onto and follow alongside as the plot thickens. Craft these characters. Try to think about what perspective of them would show everything you're trying to accomplish with your story. This has been McDougal. Merry weaving storytellers.